Hi, everybody. We are going to review how to create the tables. We did it in a very crude way based on what we knew so far. But what we are going to do now is do it the right way. But before we do that, we are going to look at this crude way first. So what I have here is the program that we developed before. We will review that. So as you can see on your screen, there is a let me just make it properly visible for me as well so I can see what you see. So we have a table where we have the numbers going from 2 through 10, and then the second column has its square, 4, 9, 16, etc., and its cube is in the third column, which is 8, 27, and 64, and so on. Right? So let's have a look at the code that we used to create this. First of all, let's look at the HTML code. And as we can see here, we have the head/head, the normal stuff in there, except for one thing here that we see, which is scripts loop.js, which is line number 11. If you look at line number 11, that is the script that is actually doing all the rendering. So the actual body, which is line 15 to 17, is only loading a JavaScript function called create table, and that create table obviously is doing all the rendering of the table. So let's have a look at that particular table, the create table function, which we wrote in the last class, which has, which to start with writes document.write, which writes the table element border equal 1, and then at the end of the function you can see document. Let me just highlight it right here. So at the end of the function we see that we are closing that particular table element or table tag, as I call it sometimes. Then we have numbers going from 2 through 10. So we have a loop where we have a variable I that starts at 2, and then we go as long as I is less than or equal to 10, and we go up by 1. So that's why we have the I++. And what do we do? First of all, we create a row with the tr tag, and then of course correspondingly we have to have the closing tag, which is a /tr. Then in between we have 3 columns. So we have a cell that is I, that goes the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then we have another cell, which is from here to here, which is the square part. Here, just pay a little bit of attention to how we have written these things down. So we have, this is a string that will appear as it is. Then it's appended by this particular value, I multiplied by I. So that's not a string. So whatever value of I is, we multiply that by I again. So that makes it I square. And then we have another string that closes the tag and then opens another cell tag. And then it is appended by the value, not a string, of I multiplied by I multiplied by I. That's I cube. And then we close that particular cell tag with a string, and that's how we are getting individual rows which have 3 columns. So this is something that we did in the last class, so I'm not developing it, but from this point on we are going to write our own new new functions, and I'm going to write them from sort of scratch. Okay, so I'm going to now go to the loop.html that we had, that we just now saw, but now it's in an editor. So I'm going to now save this as I'm going to put it under week 05 because that's where we are now, and I'm going to call this loop 2. Or maybe even say loop right, because that should be the way we should have done it. But we just wanted to show that really sometimes all we need to do is use imagination, and limited amount of knowledge can allow us to go very far. So now here I have loop right. So I'm going to say here again, I'm going to have a file called loopwrite.js and create table, again right way of doing it. So create table write.js. So that's all we have in this particular file. And actually maybe not. What we want to do is actually have that table tag here so people know what is going on. So I'm going to have a table tag. I'm going to give it an ID. Let's call it data. And I'm going to close that one. Slash table. Okay. And this is the table that I'm going to access from my loop write.js, and within that I have the function create table write, and that's the table that I'm going to write to. This time I'm going to actually use some JavaScript or jQuery functions or methods that allow us to manipulate this particular table. So I'm going to now, I think I'm done with this particular file, but I'm just going to go and get that particular file up here. You can see this is the old file, loop.js. I'm going to save this as, save as, and again I'm going to put it under week 5. So let me go up here. Let me create a directory called scripts. Remember, all our files should be in the directory scripts, and we are going to call this loop write.js, of course. And then I'm going to also name this particular function as create table write. Okay, and this function is going to be quite different from what we see here. We're not going to have document writes or anything like that. So I'm going to get rid of all of those. We don't need the closing tag because we already have the table in place. If you remember, I'm just going to bring it up here. We do have the table here, and the ID of that particular table is data. So what I'm going to do now is go back to our script, and then in here I'm going to access that particular table, and we know how to do that, right? We are going to get that table. We'll call it some kind of variable. So variable data table, that's where we are going to put the data, and that is going to be we are going to get it from the document. So document dot get element by ID. Element by ID, and then we are going to say that the ID is data. Okay, semicolon to complete it. So now we have access to this particular table. To start with, we don't know if there is any data in there. Sometimes, if you're rerunning it, we might keep on appending to this. So first of all, let's clean it. If there was anything in there that is inner HTML, then we will blank it out by assigning a null string. Then what we want to do is, earlier we just kind of displayed it, and you guys are intelligent people, so you knew, you looked at the patterns and you knew that the second column was square and the third column was cube and things like that, but it may not be always obvious to everybody. So let's have a header. So we will output the header row. I have, that's just the comments. And now what we are going to do is we are actually going to use different functions. So I'm going to create a variable called row, and that is going to be a row in the data table. So data table, and I'm going to create that particular row using a predefined method in jQuery called insert row. And 0 means it's the first row. So the numbers of rows, just like arrays, start at 0. So if you have n rows, then you go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, up to n minus 1. So if you had, in our case, we are going to have 11 rows, so they will go from 0. No, actually, we're going to have 10 rows, so they will go from 0 through 9. We don't have to keep track of it. You will see which row we are in. So what am I going to do here? I'm going to also add 3 columns to this particular row. So I'm going to say cell 1, or I'll call this num, okay? And the second one will be square, and the third one will be cube. Yes, so the num stands for number. And I'm going to use the previous row. So we have already created a variable called row right here. So I'm going to use that particular one. And I'm going to add, so here we go. I'm going to say row dot. If there was insert row, then there must be an insert cell. And we are going to insert the cell. And in location 0, that means it's the first cell. Similarly, we can have another one called square. Right? That will be our second column, and we are going to say insert cell to our row, and then that will be the first. That will be the index will be 1 for that cell or that column. That means it's the second one, and then I'm going to do one more time. So we'll have the cube. And index for that will be 2. Okay. So now I have actually created a row with 3 columns. There is nothing in those. So let's just have a look at it. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to now go to that particular location. Just you cannot see it here, but I'm going to go to week 5. Well, I might as well bring it up here. I'm going to go to week 5, and I'm going to open this particular. It doesn't have any extension, so let me give it an extension .html, and obviously this probably doesn't have any extension either, so let me give it an extension. .js. Complaining about that being not available. I'm going to just get rid of those and then reopen those again. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is go to week 5 and open this loop, right? Okay. And you will see that it doesn't do anything because we have created a table. There is a column there, but we really cannot see it anymore. We cannot see it because we don't have anything in it. So I'm going to now go back and open that one. So right here, week 05, I'm going to open that one in the script. Actually, that's where the action happens. So I'm going to edit it with Vim, and let me make it bigger so you can see it better. Edit, select font. Courier News sounds good. 16, make it bold so you can see it better. And I'm looking at it here, and I think it looks okay. Maybe even make it a little bigger than that. Select font, maybe 24. Bold is still good. And now we can definitely see it. Okay. So in this particular case, we have created a row, but there is nothing in it. So we are going to, as I mentioned before, we are going to put some code inside. So the code will be, what do we want to put it in there? For the num, we'll just say dot inner HTML to be equal to number. What else? And then we'll do the same thing for the square. And we'll do the same thing for cube. Let me save this. And now I'm going to go back and see if that somehow brings those things up there. As we can see, it does. Let me make it a little bigger so we can see it better. Okay. And now I'm going to go back and keep on adding more stuff in here, right? So the first thing here we are going to do is we are going to now add the number. So first cell. Now there are two ways of doing it, because we know that this is really the row row 1. So I could the index for this particular row will be 1. So I could just say data table row. We already have the variable, so might as well use it. Data table dot insert row. That will insert a row, and then we can say 1. Sorry, actually not so much 1, but we'll have to say I minus 1 or something like that. And if you don't know, oh, I don't know what the number is, just put it in the next place. So that's what minus 1 does. Just put it in the next place. I don't know what the number is. Don't bother me. Okay. So you just say at the end of the table. Okay. So we got that one, the row, and then now we can just essentially add the 3 columns. So here in this particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy some of this stuff because I don't want to type it. I don't have Joel here anymore to do the typing, who does it very well and also does it very accurately. Neither of those attributes are applicable to me. We already have these variables, so we don't need to really create those again. So I'm just going to say num is equal to row dot insert cell 0. So this is going to be in the new row that we created, right? So the row now is not the old one anymore. It is the next one, right? Minus 1 means the next row. And then what else do we want to do? This is all looks good, except in this particular case, we don't want number in there. We want I to be in the place. And here I want to have I multiplied by I. And here I want to have I multiplied by I, multiplied by I, and that's it. Okay, so let's just have a look at what I did here. First of all, we added a new row. It will just go into the next location, just appends to the table. Then we added 3 cells for this particular new row that we created, and then we assigned I to the first one, first column. I multiplied by I, that is I squared, to the second one, and then I multiplied by I multiplied by I, that is the cube, to the third one, and we should be done. I'm going to go back and I'm going to reload this one, and as we can see, our table is now again just like before. We don't have the borders and things like that, but we're not going to worry about that because those things are supposed to be controlled by the CSS more than the HTML itself, right? So we have essentially redone our previous exercise where we did it in a crude way, but based on the limited knowledge we had of JavaScript, and of course we knew the loops. And when you say limited knowledge, we have learned a lot of stuff, of course, since we started programming in CSCI 1226, and also limited knowledge of what you call them, HTML5. But now we are doing it the right way. That is, we are not throwing tags in place anymore. We are calling proper jQuery functions that allow us to insert rows, insert cells in rows, and then assign different HTML code to the inner HTML. So I'm going to try this. It may or may not work, but that should not. Where is the fun if it works all the time? Let me save this, and I'm going to go back and okay. So what I did was I just added the strong, the element strong/strong around the header, so the header now appears in bold. So we have number, square, cube in bold, and then we got everything else is the same. Okay. So I think this is where I'm going to end this particular video, and then the next video will be a learning activity that you guys will be doing. You will play along. It's a learning activity, so theoretically you should not lose any marks on it. But I'm going to, you can always pause that particular video and then copy some of the code that I'm going to develop, or you can write it yourself. Okay, so I'll give you that particular that particular choice. But eventually, that particular learning activity is going to be similar to a question on the midterm.